Hey folks, I was rereading Sam Williams's blog, A Critique of Crisis Theory, recently, and I was in particular rereading this article on the rate of interest in the profit of enterprise. And I always find new things when going back to this blog. It's an excellent resource. I recommend anyone to check it out. In particular, I think it offers a unique and much needed approach to Marxist economics that takes seriously the need for commodity money for measuring things and not relying on fiat money and expecting that fiat money will behave in just the same way as commodity money, such as gold. It's, I think, an unwarranted assumption, at least, and Sam Williams makes a good case that it's a flat out error to treat fiat money in the same way as commodity money. And if you go back actually to Marx himself, Marx assumed that money would be commodity money for various reasons, because only commodity money can really represent value. Fiat money really can only refer to commodity money. Fiat money itself cannot directly represent value, at least from a Marxist perspective. So Sam Williams' blog really is the best resource for explaining this viewpoint, and I recommend anyone to check it out. I think this would be a complete sea change in Marxist studies if more authors were to take this perspective into account. I think this is incredibly underappreciated. Anyways, I was rereading Sam Williams' blog, and this article here talks about how there's this during the fluctuations of a business cycle, there's this interplay between money capitalists and commodity capitalists, or industrial capitalists, as you might call it. So the money capitalists who lend money and expect to get the rate of interest, and the industrial capitalists who actually invest capital in real production and hope to get what's called the profit of enterprise, which is basically the profit that's left over from the profit rate when you subtract the rate of interest, when you subtract the financing costs from a business, assuming that it's someone is not using their own money. If they had to go out and raise a loan to invest in new production, what they would be left with after paying off the interest is the profit of enterprise. So during the business cycle, the overall profit rate gets split up between the rate of interest and the profit of enterprise. Sometimes the interest takes up the lion's share of the total profit rate. Sometimes the interest rate's very small and almost all of the profit goes towards the profit of enterprise. So sometimes the money capitalists are kind of dominant, and they take most of the profits. Sometimes the industrial capitalists are kind of in control and take most of the profits. And what determines this interplay, this kind of rivalry within the capitalist class? Well, has to do with whether money capital or commodity capital is more scarce or not. All right, so if money capital is more scarce, then the interest rate will be bid upwards as the industrial capitalists scramble to find new sources of financing, which they have a hard time finding. And this takes place usually during a boom phase of the industrial cycle. That is when businesses are increasing investment like at a high rate, when prices tend to start increasing, so you need more money to actually buy each part of your investment capital to expand your business. So the more a boom goes on in these situations, the more commodity capital there is in the economy, but the less money capital there is. And a lot of times capitalists themselves won't really make the distinction between the two, because outside of times of crisis, they'll often count on their books they'll count commodity capital as just as good as money capital. They'll say, oh, this stock of inventory is worth, such and such dollars. This capital equipment is worth such and such dollars, and they expect that to be a pretty reliable thing, where if they needed to, they think they could always just liquidate all of that inventory on the market and get that that valuation. But during times of crisis, capitalists, industrial capitalists especially, suddenly discover, much to their dismay, that commodity capital is not the same thing as money capital, that all this commodity capital that they were counting on to fetch such and such a price on the market, when they actually go to liquidate it, they find out, oh no, it's not worth nearly what I expected. And in these times, everyone becomes paranoid that there won't be enough money capital to go around to purchase everyone's commodity capital at what they think its rightful value, at a profitable price, that is. And everyone becomes insistent upon being paid in cold hard cash, and calling up their people they've loaned money out to, their debtors, calling in loans for repayment, trying to liquidate their commodity capital as quickly as possible before its price drops even more, trying to transform as much of their commodity capital into money capital as possible. Because at the end of the boom time, what happens is the rate of interest during the boom climbs and climbs, all right? And as money capital becomes more and more scarce, industrial capitalists have to spend more and more money to use this money capital, to borrow this money capital, all right? So basically what the crisis does is it shows to everyone that, hey, you need to, it kind of suddenly reveals the necessity of money capital, that things cannot just, capitalism and its circulation cannot be conducted just based on commodity capital. All right, it's not the case like Jean-Baptiste Say argued in his so-called famous Say's law, that commodities are purchased with other commodities. Empirically, anyone should realize that that is just not simply the case. Commodities are purchased with money. All right, and economists might think, well, this is a silly distinction. Who cares if they're directly purchased with money? Indirectly, they're purchased with other commodities, right? Well, you can't just simplify it in this way, because you're abstracting away the very features that make capitalism capitalism. All right, part of capitalism is the fact that there's this inherent tendency for commodities and their prices and their exchange value to deviate from their underlying values during a business cycle. They become overpriced, basically, the longer the boom goes on, especially the more credit is used to fictitiously inflate the apparent demand for commodities. You can get away with selling them for higher and higher prices because there's this apparent effective demand for them to bid up the prices, but that effective demand during a boom part of the industrial cycle is increasingly founded upon credit and not on real cold hard cash. And so when the credit collapses, the effective demand collapses. And by the way, there's not an easy way to reflate that effective demand by just printing more money, or having the central bank print more money to lower the interest rate. That's not how it works. If the central bank does that, it creates more inflation. It does not actually create more purchasing power or more effective demand. All right, and Sam Williams will go, if you read his blog, he goes into exactly why this is, why printing more fiat money does not actually increase purchasing power. All right, even in cases where there's so-called output slack. All right, where marginalist mainstream economists will say, well, there's all this unemployed labor and unemployed capital that could be put to work. So why can't the central bank just print more money to increase the effective demand and put that unused productivity back to work? Well, it doesn't work that way. If you read Sam Williams, you'll understand why.